Hello, everyone, and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric M. coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And today we've got the latest on escalating tensions between India and Pakistan with reaction from the U.S. and around the world. We'll get to all of that, but first, a look at the latest headlines. India is on high alert as Pakistan vows retaliation following Indian airstrikes on terror camps in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, launched in response to the April 22nd Pahalgam terror attack that killed 26 people. Russia and Ukraine trade a barrage of drone strikes, killing 2 in Kyiv and forcing Moscow to shut down major airports. This comes just hours before a wave of foreign leaders were set to arrive for the May 9th Victory Day parade. President Donald Trump announces the United States will stop bombing the Houthis in Yemen, saying that the Iran-backed rebel group has agreed to stop interrupting important shipping lanes in the Middle East. Sudan's army-aligned government severs diplomatic ties with the United Arab Emirates, accusing the Gulf state of supplying weapons used by the rival paramilitaries to strike its de facto capital, Port Sudan. And a Finnish fighter jet crashes near an airport in Finland's Arctic North. The pilot ejects safely and was taken to a hospital. We began with the latest from the Indian subcontinent. In the aftermath of the Pakistan-backed terror attack in Pahalgam that claimed 26 lives, India hit back with a military offensive at 1:05 a.m. local time on May 7th. In just 25 minutes, Indian ground, air, and naval forces fired 24 missiles at 9 locations in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. The mission, Operation Sindoor, named after the vermilion worn by the married Hindu women, targeted Pakistani-based perpetrators, backers, and planners of the Pahalgam attack. The anti-terror operation targeted terror hubs in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan as well. At a press briefing in New Delhi, India's foreign minister said the strikes were, quote-unquote, measured, proportionate, and non-escalatory, unquote. India also referred to a UN Security Council statement on the Pahalgam attack, which called for holding the perpetrators and sponsors accountable. Now, India said Operation Sindoor aligns with that call made by the UN Security Council on April 25th, just 3 days after the deadly terror attack. New Delhi said the strikes were both a response and a deterrent to future attacks launched from across the border.
Of Pakistan-based terrorist modules indicated that further attacks against India were impending. There was thus a compulsion both to deter and to preempt. Earlier this morning, as you would be aware, India exercised its right to respond and preempt as well as deter more such cross-border attacks.
The Indian embassy in the U.S., while explaining the scale of Indian retaliation, again spelled out the Pakistan-backed nature of Pahalgam terror attack. The embassy said New Delhi has, quote, credible leads, technical inputs, testimony of the survivors, and other evidence pointing towards the clear involvement of Pakistan-based terrorists in the attack, end quote. Just like the 2016 surgical strikes and the 2019 Balakot airstrikes, India once again delivered a strong blow to Pakistan's terror infrastructure. Demonstrating a clear resolve against cross-border terrorism, America's increasingly reliable partner in the Indo-Pacific has delivered a clear warning through these overnight strikes. And as tensions spike between South Asia's nuclear-armed neighbors, the United States responded with calls for calm and diplomacy. India launched a military operation targeting terrorist bases in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And the strike came in response to a deadly April 22nd attack in Kashmir that killed 26 people and was blamed by India on Pakistan-based terrorists. President Donald Trump, addressing reporters at the White House, refrained from assigning blame but acknowledged the severity of the situation.
No, it's a shame. We just heard about it just as we were walking in the doors of the Oval. Just heard about it. I guess people knew something was going to happen based on a little bit of the past. They've been fighting for a long time. You know, they've been fighting for many, many decades and centuries, actually, if you really think about it. No, I just hope it ends very quickly.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio took a more active diplomatic role and spoke directly with national security advisors from both countries. He emphasized the need to keep communication channels open and avoid further military escalation. He also posted on X that the State Department was closely monitoring the situation and continuing efforts to support a peaceful resolution. India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval reportedly briefed Rubio on the details of the strikes, which were focused, preemptive, and non-escalatory. The U.S. maintains strong ties with India and has shown increasing alignment with New Delhi in recent years, particularly as part of its Indo-Pacific strategy to counterbalance China. Meanwhile, Washington also maintains ties with Pakistan, though its importance has diminished since the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. Even as American officials reiterated support for India in the aftermath of the April 22nd attack, Washington stopped short of directly accusing Pakistan. Analysts suggest that the U.S. may adopt a restrained posture in the early days of this flare-up, with its diplomatic bandwidth already stretched by ongoing crises in Ukraine and Gaza. The State Department has maintained that it remains engaged with both sides at multiple levels and continues to push for de-escalation. While India and Pakistan have a long and fraught history over Kashmir, U.S. officials say the current focus is on preventing any further escalation of the conflict. With New Delhi standing firm on its right to defend itself from cross-border terrorism and Pakistan promising a response, all eyes are now on Washington's next move. For more on this, we spoke with former CIA officer Glenn Carl. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Your response to India's strike on Pakistan, what is your response?
Well, I think, as the Indian government said, it is a clearly measured response, although a strong one. 9 sites is a lot. But by stating that it was measured and defensive, and that we, India, did not strike any military facilities, but only terrorist-related ones, the government is sending a clear message that it wanted to make a point that terrorist attacks will not be allowed or go unpunished, but that India does not want to see matters spiral out of control or much greater. So now the responsibility is on Pakistan to see how it responds and whether it feels compelled for sake of honor in the eyes of its public to do something in response.
India's strike, while sending a firm message to Pakistan, is a responsible one, while attacks were only on terror targets. What do you have to say about that?
I think that is an accurate statement. Yes, of course, Pakistan is going to beat its breast and cry that this is an unprovoked attack and totally unjust, and will defend our honor and so on. Any government will probably have to do that, even though it is known that Pakistan has for decades, through its intelligence service, used terrorist organizations to try to advance its policies, which are to create trouble for India in Kashmir specifically. But it is we're involved in a classic dynamic of terrorist attack, government response, defensive protection of honor by the now receiving party, which is Pakistan. The wise step, if Pakistan wishes to avoid escalation, would be to signal informally behind the scenes to India that it will, for the sake of honor, take some measure, but give India time to prepare for it, and then to blow up a bomb next to a base without killing anybody. But I don't know if Pakistan will be that wise.
India informed its allies, including the US, right after the attack, once again behaving responsibly. Your reaction to that?
I think that's true. Yes, it's wise in India's interest to advise in advance allies and even not allies that here is what we're doing, here are our objectives, here is how it is limited, here is why, and then to do it. Something that the average person, I think, doesn't really know is in diplomacy and in negotiations. And what is this but a negotiation with bombs in some sense? You always want your adversary, your counterpart, to know in advance, just about always, what you are going to do and why. That creates trust, helps avoid unintended consequences. It doesn't guarantee it, but it's a responsible thing. And so India has acted in a classic diplomatic, military intelligence fashion in this regard. It seems to have been a carefully calibrated response, but it doesn't guarantee that things won't spiral off worse, of course.
Speaking on reactions, President Trump has already reacted. What do you think going forward will the US's response? Is there a fear that Pakistan will escalate tensions?
Well, there is, certainly. Now, the Secretary of State Rubio's statement, which I think is so far as I'm aware, the official response of the U.S., was to acknowledge the act and to call for restraint and to avoid escalation. By acknowledging the act, it actually tacitly, the United States accepts, does not criticize, and implicitly views as justified the action that India took. And it cautions Pakistan, who now has the responsibility to decide what to do, not to escalate. So it was a measured response, and the U.S.'s interest is that there not be an escalating war. And so that's what it seeks to say, while neither criticizing Pakistan nor explicitly congratulating or supporting India. So it was also a classic response, but one that has cautioned Pakistan, frankly.
Thank you very much for your insight, and thank you for joining us on First Post.
More reactions continue to pour in from across the world following India's targeted strike against terrorist networks inside Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. India's latest military operation against Pakistan following the Pahalgam terror attack has escalated tensions not just between the two countries, but it's also stoked fear of a wider conflict in the region. Following the strike, world leaders have called for both sides to de-escalate tensions. Our next report brings you the details.
Just 2 weeks after the Pahalgam terror attack, which claimed the lives of 26 civilians, India has hit back against Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. India's Operation Sindoor, that targeted terror infrastructure in Pakistan, has garnered reactions from across the world. To begin with, Israel's ambassador to India, Reuven Azar, has voiced his country's support for India's right to self-defense. In a post on X, Ambassador Azar stated, Israel supports India's right for self-defense. Terrorists should know there's no place to hide from their heinous crimes against the innocent. India's all-weather ally Russia has called for both sides to show restraint after India's attack on Pakistan's terror infrastructure. Adding to the calls for de-escalation, the United Arab Emirates has also urged both nations to exercise restraint and avoid further escalations.
We would always, in a situation...
The United Kingdom's Trade Secretary Jonathan Reynolds said that the country is ready to support both India and Pakistan to de-escalate tensions.
The market value is...
French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot has also urged both sides to exercise restraint, to avoid escalation and to protect civilians, while understanding India's desire to protect itself against the scourge of terrorism. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has expressed his very serious concern over the Indian strikes and has called for maximum military restraint from both India and Pakistan, according to his spokesperson. Japan Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshimasa Hayashi has called on India and Pakistan to stabilize the situation through dialogue to ensure peace and stability in South Asia. Malaysia, meanwhile, has warned that tensions between India and Pakistan could potentially disrupt rice imports to the heavily dependent Southeast Asian nation, prompting it to look elsewhere for supplies. And Pakistan's staunch ally China has called on both New Delhi and Islamabad to exercise maximum restraint in the larger interest of peace and stability in the region. While countries call on both India and Pakistan to exercise restraint, they would probably be better off telling Islamabad to stop its terror factory from bleeding India.
And after India's precision strikes on terror camps in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, Islamabad retaliated by shelling civilian villages along the line of control. The Pakistani army launched heavy mortar fire, killing at least 10 civilians and injuring dozens more. The Indian army responded swiftly as border security forces remain on high alert. Here's our report on Pakistan's escalating aggression along the border.
In a pre-dawn operation named Sindoor, India launched precision missile strikes on 9 terror hideouts in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. This high-stakes retaliation came in response to the April 22nd terror attack in Pahalgam, which claimed 26 innocent lives, mostly tourists. As India unleashed missiles, Pakistan's air defense failed to intercept them. Caught unguarded, Pakistan scrambled to tackle the situation. So within minutes, it resorted to cross-border firing. Pakistan fired mortars targeting civilians in Indian villages along the line of control. At least 10 civilians have been killed and dozens were injured. Officials described it as the heaviest shelling in years. Officials say shellings targeted districts along the LOC, including Poonch, Rajouri, Kupwara and Baramulla. Poonch district was the worst hit, accounting for all civilian deaths. The Indian forces responded proportionately. Officials say several enemy posts involved in the firing were destroyed. The BSF and Indian Army have been placed on high alert. As tensions escalated, residents described terrifying scenes on the ground. Families fled into the darkness, barefoot, panicked, seeking shelter in underground bunkers. Most of the victims were women, children, and the elderly. Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Omar Abdullah called Pakistan's response arbitrary and indiscriminate, adding it was anything but proportionate. This marks the 13th straight night of unprovoked firing along the borders in Jammu and Kashmir since the Pahalgam attack. As Pakistan provokes, India mobilizes. Artillery units, drones and surveillance teams have been deployed. Citizens near the LOC are also on alert, taking precautions, preparing underground bunkers and stocking essentials. As the situation escalates, the nation stands united, resilient and determined in its unwavering fight against terrorism.
In a bold, coordinated, and precise military action, the Indian armed forces carried out missile strikes targeting terror camps and hubs in Pakistan, avenging the April 22nd Pahalgam terror attack that left 26 civilians killed. The latest strikes as part of Operation Sindoor against Pakistan-sponsored and bred terrorism are not the first. In fact, India delivered a befitting reply to Pakistan-based terror groups with surgical strikes in 2016 and with the Balakot airstrikes in 2019. Now with the Operation Sindoor, India has delivered a fiercer response. How was, in fact, the latest strike different from the previous ones? Our next report breaks it down for you.
April 22nd, 2025. Pahalgam, Jammu and Kashmir. 26 innocents singled out for their religion and shot to death in broad daylight by Pakistan-linked terrorists. April 24th, 2025. Punishment beyond imagination for the terrorists. This is what the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi promised. He vowed to hunt down those who backed terrorists, saying they would be pursued to the ends of the world.
उन आतंकियों को और इस हमले की साजिश रचने वालों को उनकी कल्पना से भी बड़ी सजा मिलेगी.
April 29th, 2025. After a series of marathon meetings, Indian armed forces were given complete operational freedom. This led to the execution of the most unprecedented attack on Pakistani terrorists in decades on May 7th, 2025. Operation Sindoor. India's latest strikes against Pakistan's terror bases are not the first. And if Islamabad does not mend its ways, it certainly won't be the last. Armed with deadly weapons, the Indian Army crossed the line of control and destroyed terror launch pads in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Reports say over 100 terrorists were killed. This was a preemptive strike against terrorists planning to infiltrate the border, and was in response to a Jaish-e-Mohammed attack on an Indian Army Brigade headquarters in Jammu and Kashmir's Uri, where 19 soldiers lost their lives after a 6-hour gun battle. 4 terrorists were also gunned down. 3 years later, the Kashmir Valley was once again soaked in blood. 40 CRPF soldiers lost their lives after their convoy was attacked by a suicide bomber. Just like Uri, this time too, India exposed Pakistan's involvement in the attack carried out by Jaish-e-Mohammed. 13 days later, a dozen Indian Air Force Mirage jets streaked 20 kilometers across the Yellow Sea into Pakistan's territory, targeting Jaish training camps in Balakot. Within 20 minutes, at least 6 buildings in the Jaish terror base were brought down to rubble. But this time, the response was bolder, fiercer and deeper inside Pakistan's terror camps, with strikes as far as Muridke near Lahore and near Sialkot. The high-precision missile strikes hit 9 terror camps and bases linked to the Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. In comparison to Operation Sindoor, the previous strikes now seem relatively limited in scope and geography. This is because this time the Indian armed forces not only hit more targets but also penetrated deeper into Pakistani territory. Sophisticated precise munitions, including loitering munitions and guided missiles, were used. The strikes were focused, measured and non-escalatory. No Pakistani military sites were targeted, just terror centers. With Operation Sindoor, like the Red Vermilion, India has drawn a clear red line. It will not back down in its fight against terrorism. It is ready to respond to Pakistan's misadventures, and it is resolved to give a befitting response to any attack on its land and its people. But what happens next? Escalation or deterrence?
That's our show for today. We certainly thank all of you for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in.